SEC sues Coinbase. This was anticipated following news of a Wells notice being issued to the U.S. crypto exchange. But now we see it, and now we know that the SEC is trying to tackle Coinbase for allegedly being an unregistered securities exchange. This is one day after similar action against Binance. A bit different in tone, I would say, but certainly the substance of the complaint is very similar. The SEC now officially going after Coinbase as well. Very wild 2 days in the crypto markets to see this as a quick 1-2 punch from Gary Gensler's SEC. I'm going to throw this to Will. What do you think? What stands out to you about this one?
Yeah, I woke up late this morning and this was just like a daze in confusion seeing a breaking headline like this. Your mind starts spinning and you're like, oh, I'm behind in everything. And you start reading the subtext and you want to get into the documentation itself. What we know so far, and I'm going to compare it against the Binance case, is that this case against Coinbase has to do with listings of different assets on the exchange itself. They aren't bringing anything against Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. They're specifically bringing against some of the token listings. Historically, Coinbase was actually pretty conservative about listing some tokens, and they did that because they wanted to be in step with regulators in the US. But over the last 4 years, they started losing some ground against incumbents or new guys on the beat, I should say, like Binance. And so they started opening up listings to a lot of different tokens. So, if these other exchanges are not going to be brought into compliance, if they're quote unquote outside US shores, then why can't we compete against them? Let's start listing some tokens. And now you see that strategy kind of got them in hot water here, and there's a slew of different tokens that are now being seen as securities within the eyes of the SEC, and the SEC is going to hold Coinbase liable. For the Binance story yesterday, that had a lot to do with not only the tokens listing, such as BNB or BUSD or some other tokens, but also had to do with the fact that they were supposed to be outside the US, but still offering its products to US customers. And there's some notes from executives, compliance officers, etc., at Binance that said that they were operating in the US without a license. So it's pretty damning evidence. So two very different cases, I would say, but the core issue is basically the same, that the SEC sees a lot of these token offerings from these products as unregistered securities. Zach.
Yeah, I think critically, in addition to that, there's just questions about the structure of Coinbase that are listed here in this document, this complaint, right? So the merging of these functions that are traditionally separate in traditional financial markets, the idea of being an exchange, a clearinghouse, all these things, Coinbase provides all those functions, right? And I think historically in the world of securities, they're sort of separated out by individual actors such that the conflicts of interest are minimized, right? So the SEC is saying, hey, not only did you not register as a national securities exchange, but you're doing all these other clearing and settlement functions that traditionally should be executed by other firms outside of the walls of Coinbase itself. So there is, in addition to some of these claims of some of these assets being unregistered securities, there are significant claims against the structure of Coinbase itself. Also worth noting that the staking program is hit here as well. So there's a few fronts over which the SEC is alleging that Coinbase has done wrong. But pretty crazy to watch this, certainly capturing people's interest on Twitter and elsewhere. Jen, what are you thinking?
Oh, what a morning. So I just had to take a big sigh there. Yeah, so much going on. I think that both suits are so well researched. The SEC obviously took a lot of time to investigate both firms, and there are some pretty damning allegations here. What's interesting is right after the SEC suing Coinbase, right after that news broke this morning, we learned that 10 states are also suing Coinbase or looking into Coinbase for their EARN program. And so while there is no evidence to say that there is a coordinated attack here, it pretty well seems very coordinated that all of these lawsuits are dropping one after another. And if you're a centralized exchange in the US right now, I can't imagine what's going on behind the scenes. For the securities that are listed in both suits, I know we're going to talk about that in the next story. I can't imagine what's going on behind the scenes for some of these securities. Some of these alleged securities, some of these projects who have alleged securities who have popped up in these suits. I wonder if they've heard from the SEC. I wonder if they knew that this was going to happen. And I wonder how they are going to respond to this. I just have so many questions when it comes to what's going to happen next. And I guess my last thought here is, Ripple recently came out and said they're going to spend I think, $200 million defending themselves against the SEC. Binance, biggest crypto exchange in the world, Coinbase, biggest exchange in the US. I wonder how the defense in both of these suits is going to affect their business plans for expansion and diversification, especially over the rest of the bear. But Zach?
Yeah, in addition to this bombshell filing, we have SEC Chair Gary Gensler making the rounds in the press. He was on CNBC earlier today. Let's hear what he said.
Look, we don't need more digital currency. We already have digital currency. It's called the US dollar. It's called the euro. It's called the yen. They're all digital right now. We already have digital investments.
Those are the talking points, and he's sticking to it. It's Gary Gensler on CNBC earlier today discussing the action against Coinbase and also Binance. Will, what do you think? What do you think about that line of reasoning? We already have enough digital currencies. I think it's maybe eliding a key point of what cryptocurrencies can offer. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, the basic point is not wrong. All these currencies are digital at this point. The thing that's odd here is that it's not really his purview. Like, his job is to look at the securities market and protect investors, and to also make sure that there's good capital formation in the United States. His job is not to litigate what is a good investment or what is a bad investment. It's also not his decision to make currency decisions, right? That's up to the Treasury Department. That's really up to Congress. That is up to IRS. That has nothing really to do with the Securities Administration at all. So it's odd to see that. I suppose maybe if you're taking like a very wide view of all these things, you could say like, well, he needs to be lockstep with the further administrations. If there is going to be like a new incumbent or a new emerging currency popping up and it's going to maybe fall under the Securities Administration at the beginning, then he could swat it down, and maybe that's the line he's taking. But it's just odd to see that, right? It's not really in his purview. Jen, what do you think about that?
Well, I just want to point to some comments I've heard in Canada. So with all of the regulatory news in Canada, exchanges leaving Canada, I've heard people say, like, that you can't have crypto in Canada anymore. People really do believe by reading these headlines that there are no on and off ramps. It really is taking more, I think, out of people and more of a push for people to go and do their own research and figure out how to interact with crypto assets if they want to. And I think comments like this could be doing something similar, right? You have these big headlines. You have Gary Gensler come out and say digital currency already exists. There's no need to engage. There are all these things happening behind the scenes with the people who are operating the exchanges that have these currencies. And so I think that it's probably affecting the retail person who has not really interacted with crypto yet, maybe was interested, and now is taking a backseat to see what happens in the US. And if things continue this way, they may not interact with crypto for a really long time. Zach?
Yeah, I think also we should discuss, some of these assets that are listed. I think what a lot of people are saying is the one that's not listed, ETH, the native currency of the Ethereum blockchain, not listed on this, which some are seeing as potentially a good sign. There's been a lot of talk as to whether or not ETH would be considered a security under Gary Gensler's regime. So the fact that that one is not listed has people interested for sure. It is pretty crazy, like how to delineate which one is which, right? I think is also sort of a time aspect, right? Ethereum has sort of reached sort of like escape velocity. But if you look at like some of these claims that are in these documents, some of them are the same as the Binance one, others are new. If you look at sort of the claims as to how these foundations or these founding teams are interacting with these blockchains, like they're just in an earlier stage relative to what Ethereum is at now, right? And so I think there's this weird sort of time aspect in terms of cherry picking people who are running afoul of creating something and putting it out into the world. It's a bit crazy to watch, honestly. It's hard to sort of understand entirely the rationale. So there's a lot of sort of, wondering about what's all going on there. But I think we can leave that there. Plenty to discuss. There's so much going on around this one. A lot of good commentary out on CoinDesk.com and other outlets.